webinar. I'm really delighted to be presenting another session on behalf of IPSE, the membership body supporting contractors, independent professionals and freelancers. My name is Luann Wise, and today's session is all about using visual content for social media. The session is being recorded. You'll be sent a copy of the recording and the slides via email. We will have plenty of time for Q&A at the end of the session, but do feel free to contact me if there's anything that you think about afterwards, or in fact if you're watching the recording. Just to start, because we're all looking at computer screens and can't see each other, I've just popped on the next slide a picture of me, so you know who's talking, and to let you know that I am an independent marketing consultant. I'm a small business owner. I've been running my consultancy now for nearly 8 years. I am an author. That's my book I'm holding there. It's Relax, It's Only Social Media. I'm also a course instructor for LinkedIn Learning. So if you have a subscription to LinkedIn Learning, or if you have a premium subscription to LinkedIn, then there are hundreds, if not thousands, of online learning courses that you can take a look at. And I have courses on there on content marketing, on social media, on how to target your audience, and how to manage and run events. I'm also an accredited Facebook trainer, and I'm really proud to be an IPSE ambassador. The agenda for today is that we're going to talk about content types, and specifically about visual content. I felt a little bit of pressure putting the slide deck together today because I'm usually much more about words than images, but we'll talk through the presentation about how we all need to embrace those. I'll be talking about creating a style guide, how to optimize images for the different social media platforms. I'll be talking as well about stock images, creating images, GIFs and memes, infographics, and specifically, because this is a social media presentation, I'm going to talk a little bit about Instagram and some tools that are really helpful for that purpose. I will summarize, and then we'll have time for some Q&A. Throughout, I will be sharing some useful tools that you can use if you don't have the budget for graphic designers and photographers. So let's talk about content types. There are broadly 4 different types of content that we could be using for our marketing, for social media. That is, written is one of the main content types, and probably one of the first things we think about is blogging. But of course there are white papers, guides, checklists, reports, presentations, ebooks and books, all predominantly written text. Then there's the visual content, which is what we're talking about in this session. That can involve anything from the GIFs and memes I've talked about, to product imagery, team photography, and infographics. It could be static images, it could be moving images. But it's not quite the audio and video content, which can be event coverage, demonstrations, interviews, webinars, and podcasts. And finally, there's a 4th content type, which kind of is everything else, which can be the interactive content. It could be quizzes, it could be calculators, polls, games, competitions, anything that allows your audience to interact with you and really get involved in that kind of content. Now, in terms of visual content, this is a survey from Social Media Examiner, and they found that 85% of the 5,000 online marketers they surveyed at the end of 2007 used visuals. In this graph, it shows 85%, and that was up from just the previous year when it was 74%. It does show blogging as the next most popular type of content, and then video, live video, and podcasting. Now, the importance of visual content is because many people, in fact 65%, are visual learners. The brain processes visuals much faster than text, 60,000 times faster, in fact. And we retain only 10 to 20% of the information we read or hear. But once information is paired with visual elements, the information retained can go up to around 65%. Visuals can help people better understand or appreciate the message you're trying to share. And just think, it's always easier to follow instructions if there's illustrations or screenshot examples. So over time, we've seen a big shift in visual content on social media. That's partly to do with the features that the platforms allow us to use in terms of our content, but also because of the way that the pace changes and the way that people like to consume content now. The adage is true, you know, a picture is worth 1,000 words. And with so much content on social media, visual information is a really great way to stand out. The importance of the visual content to social media is that users will engage more with it. It helps them relate to you, and much more quickly as well. It can create what we call a thumb-stopping moment as people are scrolling through their mobile phones. Tweets will get more retweets with an image. Facebook posts will get more likes and comments with an image. In fact, as I was researching this presentation, there were so many different stats. I haven't included those specifically, but they all do show those same patterns. A December 2016 study by Venngage, reported by Social Media Examiner, showed that original images such as infographics get the most engagement at 41.5%. While data visualizations, that's kind of your infographics and your charts and your graphs, received 25.7% engagement. The remaining third of the content was split between videos and presentations, stock photos, GIFs and memes. However, the respondents' usage habits don't reflect the same data. This is what they knew got the highest engagement, but if I pop this chart side by side with another one of actually what people are using, it's slightly different. 35% of respondents are using stock photos in their visual posts, and 30.4% used original images such as infographics, much lower. Videos accounted for only 15.2% of use versus the 20.2%, and data visualization significantly less as well. But the more light-hearted GIFs and memes, which I'll talk about later, about the same, in fact just 0.4% higher. And this study also found that nearly 2/3 of respondents found consistently producing engaging visuals and producing well-designed visuals was really challenging. It was the most challenging aspects of this visual content and their social media marketing efforts. And I have to say, I agree with this. I'm really comfortable with words, but we do need to think about visual content, particularly because this is how people are consuming information and retaining information. So I've got some helpful tools for you along the way to make that easier. But first, before we dive into the tools, it's really important to take some time to plan our visual content. You know, what do we want to include, and what do we want that to look like as well? Because consistency is really, really important. Your style guide could be about colours, it could be about picking a colour palette, it could be about fonts and typography as well. You know, what fonts will you use for your headlines versus your subheadings and main body text? Do you want to use photos, or actually is illustrations and vector graphics more your thing? And what tone of voice do you want to get across in your visual content as well? I've just picked one example here from an Instagram feed that I find is amazing. It's a variety of content. Martha Brooke sell beautiful stationery, but as you can see just for this kind of screenshot of the last 12 images, there's a clear colour palette of pastels, there's clear messaging, there's about their office, there's about their products, there's Martha Brooke herself branded in a coat to match the colour theme. It really does tell a story. And that's what this is really about, because every social media post is a branding opportunity. Visual content should be used to tell stories about your business, your products, your services, and your people. And I'll come on to this again shortly, but stories is a feature on both Instagram and Facebook that's really increasing in popularity. They are a different way of sharing visual content. They appear right in front of your audience and they disappear after 24 hours. But let's talk about the platforms. Without spending ages going through each of the social media platforms, I think it's really important that you know and understand that each platform does have a different audience, it has a different context, and it has a different style. But before you start posting content that's visual or text or video, it's important that you brand your social media profiles with header images, you change the colours where you can, you include your logo at the right size, you have a good profile photo, because the first impressions really do count, and poor images where you're too small to even be seen is a real opportunity lost. I know it can be difficult to create all of these header images and logos, particularly as sizes often change. And I found this link from Sprout Social, that is always up to date with the latest social media images sizes. So I've popped a short link into it there. You can see here the images that you would need for Twitter, and also there's a really useful tool in there that Sprout Social have for, it's called Landscape, that allows you to resize, crop and scale your images to those sizes. Just to briefly talk through the social media platforms. LinkedIn, yes, you can post images. You can post images if you're writing articles in the header. You can include images and screenshots within the article. If you're just doing short form updates, a status update, then you can attach images to that as well. I would always say that LinkedIn is probably the less visual platform out of the big four, but if you have an image and it's relevant and it's going to grab attention, then use it. Twitter allows images within the feed, and it can be really useful because it's so fast paced anyway that if you have an image that supports your tweet that can grab attention, then add it to your post, attach it as an image on there. Facebook, lots of images are used on Facebook. There's more space for images on Facebook as well. As you scroll through your news feed, you're probably spotting these. Most posts on Facebook do have an image attached to them. And then we get to Instagram, which is all about images. Yes, you have some text in the caption, but it really is all about images that you're using there. And we'll talk about those in a second. Now, going back to those charts, if you get a chance to look at those again, yes, it is always going to be preferable to use original images. It's more personal, but it's not always possible. If you are a photographer, then brilliant. You know, you've got your feeds already sorted. If you've got a decent smartphone, then you should be able to capture some decent images there as well. But actually, stock images can be really useful, and it could be that your social media feeds are entirely curated from stock images if you wanted to. There's lots of image libraries available online, but many of them do come with prices. But there are some free sites that provide really good quality stock photos that you can use royalty-free at no cost. I've just popped 3 on the slide here that I use. Unsplash and Pixabay have a real mixture of images, of photography and illustration. But I personally, with a lot of my content that you may have seen, use a lot of vector images, illustrative style. So Vector Stock is my go-to website for that. And you can just search in the search bar, grab loads of images, download them, and use them across your social media content. Creating images, as opposed to photography, yes, you can use a graphic designer, but there's a couple of tools I use for this as well. I use a tool called Canva to create images. That could be for Twitter posts, it could be for Instagram, it could be just adding some text. I personally pay to upgrade my Canva account to a pro account, which allows me to brand it. It costs less than £10 a month, but I've been able to upload my fonts, my brand colours, my logos to that. In fact, a graphic designer set it up for me with lots of templates. So all I need to do is go in and change the text if I'm trying to promote a webinar or an event or a new course, etc. And there's another lovely tool called WordSwag. If you like the style of using images with texts and quotes, motivational quotes are hugely popular over the top, then WordSwag is a free tool that allows you to do that. If you can't think of the quotes, if you can't think of sayings and jokes, then there's lots already populated in there that you can have a look through. Now, I talked about having this style guide earlier, and you have to decide your tone of voice and what's right for you and what's perhaps not right for you. For some people, GIFs and memes are right. For others, perhaps it's not their tone of voice and they wouldn't use them, particularly for a business-to-business platform. GIFs are animated video files with no sounds, and memes are images, videos, pieces of texts like this one. I thought this would be relevant to freelancers and contractors of the IPSE membership. Pieces of text that are typically humorous and they're used online. People really like to share GIFs and memes. For GIFs, there's a website called Giphy, which is a useful website you can find and you can create GIFs on there. Memes, Well, if you just Google a topic and meme, you will find some. But Meme Generator is a really easy to use website if you've got some great ideas and want to create some memes of your own. Back to something perhaps a little more formal. It was included in those charts earlier as a really useful source of visualizing data. And I find infographics are a great way to repurpose heavy text content, such as presentations, such as blogs, such as slides and white papers, because they visually summarize the complex data in bite-sized snippets. Here's an example of one that I've created that goes at the end of a blog about how to write a blog. I've summarized that visually in terms of 21 things to do after you've written a blog post. You don't need 21 things in an infographic. You could just have 1 point or 2 or 3 points. Personally, I use a graphic designer to create my graphics for me, but Pictochart is a really useful tool if you want to try it out for yourself. So to move on to Instagram, this is the really visual platform. It's now owned by Facebook, and it's hit some huge numbers recently. It hit 1 billion monthly active users, 500 million, so half of those are using the platform daily. And introduced in August 2016, so just over 2 years ago, were the stories that I was talking about earlier, that appear at the top of your feed on your mobile, or if you do look at a desktop, and they disappear after 24 hours. If you want to know more about Instagram, you need to set up your profile, you want to know how to use stories, then I actually have a free email course for that you can find on my website, linked there under the free resources section. For 7 days, you'll receive an email with a task to do every day. But just to talk a little bit about stories and the feed, the 2 parts of Instagram, this is where you could have a different plan for your content to use the 2 different areas. Personally, I use the feed, the grid, for images that I'm happy to stick around. So it could be promoting a course, it could be a picture of me at an event. But I use stories for the behind the scenes, what I'm working on, the things that I don't need to stick around for a long time, but it's good to show my audience what I'm doing, where I am, maybe how I'm relaxing on a weekend, what I'm up to, knowing that they can disappear in 24 hours. Got a couple of tools that can help you with Instagram as well. If you think again that creating the content is a huge amount of work, about being consistent is really difficult, there's one tool that I use in particular for Instagram, and that's Planoly. This is a GIF here that I grabbed for the website showing you how to use Planoly. There is a free version, but there is also a paid version where you can upload your images to Planoly and you can schedule from there. So you can see right now that the GIF is typing out how you can type your caption and that you can schedule in advance. And the great thing about Planoly that I prefer over other scheduling tools for Instagram is that you can see what your feed, the grid, is going to look like as you schedule things in advance. It's a really easy to use app. You can upload lots of images at a time. If you take a photo on your phone, you can send it to Planoly, to the app, because personally I'm much more comfortable using a desktop to do my work than trying to do some things on the hoof on my mobile phone. As you can see, it's a really easy tool to use. Drag and drop, type your text in, schedule the days and times that you want some post. The other tool that I use for Instagram, and I particularly like this, is called StoryTow. And this is a way that you can schedule Instagram stories. So while very much social media is often about being in the moment, especially if you want your content to be inspiring and that it is short-lived 24 hours, but actually sometimes you want stories you want to pre-plan them if it's to support an event or a promotion or some activity. And the way that I've used StoryTow is to create some graphics in Canva and then to upload them. Really simply choose the file to upload, and then I can schedule the times that I want those stories to go onto my profile. It means that I can have them happening when I'm out at meetings and I'm out at events. I don't miss the content. StoryTow is free for 10 stories a month. Thereafter, you would pay a very small fee. you can see here that I've created some for the items that I have on sale on my website, my book, an ebook. I'm showing that my shop is open for business and that I have a desk calendar. So I scheduled these in advance. And what you can then do with stories, if you do want to save them, if they do need more than 24 hours of life, you can save them as a highlight. I haven't got a screenshot here, but if you do have a look at my Instagram, which is instagram.com/LuanneWise, you can see that I have a highlighted story on my shop and about me and events as well. Just a much easier way of managing this, because visual content can take so much more time, and we do have other things to do, particularly as a small business owner. Just to bring some of those points to a summary, I know I've given you lots of tools and lots of opportunity, but I wanted to create a slide deck that wouldn't take up too much of your lunchtime and that you could have a look at afterwards. The main point about visual content is that so many of us are visual learners. Visuals are easier to retain, they're more engagement, and the more engagement we get on our content on social media in terms of likes, shares and comments, well, they help to increase the reach of our content to get in front of new audiences. It's really important to create a style guide to aid consistency. And visual content is really useful to repurpose any written content that you've already got. If you've already been blogging, then repurpose that, create some images, create some slides, create some GIFs and some short content around that. And hopefully that'll be a quick win using some of the tools that I've talked about to add some more visual content to your social media feeds. It's almost just gone 10 to 1. That is the slide deck that I've got for today. So if you have any questions, please pop them into the box. Okay, there's a couple of questions coming through. So how do you manage all of this? I think the most important thing about social media as a whole, and particularly with visual content, is that you batch your time. I talk to lots of people face to face and online about, managing social media. And for me, the biggest tip for this is about time management, is about managing your time and not letting this be a time suck. So if you use tools particularly like Canva and you want to create some top tips, then don't just do that on a once a week when you need to post a top tip. Batch your time and create 10, 20 top tips all at once, have them saved and schedule them as well, whether that's with Hootsuite, Buffer, Planoly, whatever you're using. I think batching your time to manage social media better is really important. And then that allows you to be consistent with your posting, with your content, and with frequency as well, which is really important for engaging your audience. Question again there about scheduling. There is lots of social media tools, and with any social media tools, even though I've given you lots of ideas today, what I think is most important is that you identify the issue that you have, and then you go and find a tool that helps you solve it, rather than have this long list of 20 tools, or I heard someone say that Canva's good or StoryTow's good. Identify what your problem is, and then go and find the tool for it. Personally, I use Hootsuite as my scheduling platform. It's one that I've used for a long time. I pay for it because of the additional functionality that I like in terms of being able to add team members if I need to, if I want to bulk upload content as well. The downside, and this is another question that's just coming through, is that there can be some issues with Hootsuite in terms of uploading images, and yes, you do need to probably do some of that afterwards. And that's particularly why for Instagram I prefer Planoly. The question here is about using third-party management tools which can reduce the reach of content. This is a frequent, I don't want to say myth, that I see posted, because I don't know whether it's a myth or not, but I have seen research very recently, actually, from one of the platforms has done some research around, does third-party scheduling tools throttle content and reduce engagement and reduce reach? These tools exist to help you manage your time, and whether you post a piece of content on a third-party tool or on the platform themselves, if it's not great content, it's not going to get great engagement. It's all about the quality of the content, and that content being good and relevant for your target audience, I think, is much more important. And if a management tool to help you schedule allows you to be more consistent, post with frequency, relieve you of the pressure and the overwhelm of posting content on social media, then I would go for a management tool. The answers are always in your own data and testing. It's completely up to you. I haven't seen it proven either way to kind of confirm or deny that, but lots of people use management tools for time management. Some various questions, all quite similar, so I'm just trying to group some of these. Do I see that Instagram is the primary visual platform for a while? Yes, it is. You know, it's very visual, and I think that's why it's been so successful, because it was completely different to the other platforms that, you know, had appeared a few years earlier. It is very different from LinkedIn. It's very different from Twitter. It's very different from Facebook, and it was obviously popular and performing well for Facebook to purchase it. Are there any other platforms emerging? There's always new things, there's always beta things coming out, there's always niche areas, but my answer to this is usually Google tried to launch a social media platform. Google Plus is closing down for consumers. I think it's really important to watch the marketplace, watch the news, see what's going up, but primarily focus on where your audience are, and your audience are most likely to be found on the big social media platforms. That's what you should be worrying about. Well, you know, staying in the moment, one eye on the future. And there's lots of people commenting on what's coming up and what's happening. I can share some resources on that, but I also do a weekly roundup email myself with updates that are going on, and you can subscribe to that via my website. There's a lot of different social media platforms. Is there one that I should start with? As I just said, start with the platform where you can find your target audience. If you have an objective to use social media to develop your business, to talk about your business, build awareness, create sales, then you need to be where your audience are, which means you need to ask them, you need to research them, and play around until you find them, see what they're talking about, and then join the party that they're at. Wow, loads of questions coming through today. A bit more about Instagram highlights. Yeah, so Instagram highlights are basically saved stories. So if you go on to someone's Instagram profile, after the bio section at the top, you will see some circles, and this is where people have saved their story and given it a name. So it really just is a way of almost pinning content to the top of your Instagram profile that has been created from a story. If you have a look at my Instagram profile, /Luann Wise, you'll see that I have 4 highlights that are saved. And every time I create a story, I can decide if I want to save it to one of those categories or create something new. It's also within the 7-day email course that I mentioned earlier. There is a day on creating stories and adding them to highlights. What else would I include in a style guide? I think it's important to have a style guide in terms of planning out your content, how you want your social media feeds to look and feel to your audience. Big brands will create huge documents, tone of voice guidelines, image guidelines, example image styles. It's up to you how much depth you want to go into it, but I think it's important maybe to have a look at the image libraries, pick out some styles of photography or vector images or illustrations that you like. I think it is very important to choose some colours that suit your business. You look through, for example, Martha Brooks that I showed, but there's some great social media feeds on Instagram that have some colour themes to them. There's one that particularly uses shades of green in their content. It just makes it calmer when someone's looking, that every image isn't completely different or ad hoc. It gives some sense of theme to it, just as you would dress a shop window if you had one. This is how you could look at your social media content. Social media, how often should a business post? Sometimes it feels like the audience don't want to see posts for the sake of it. Is there a happy medium? Absolutely, and actually this helps with planning as well, because if you plan your content, have some core themes that you will always talk about, that helps. How often should you post? When you have something relevant to say. Absolutely, don't post for the sake of it. Don't post 3 times a day because you read an article that says you should post 3 times a day. If you've got enough content that matches your messages and what your business is about to post that often, brilliant. If not, you know, don't sweat it for the fact that you've got to tick a box. In terms of Facebook and Instagram, I would, as a guideline, go for once a day if you can. Twitter obviously is a lot more fast-paced, and a tweet doesn't stick around for hours. You've got 20 minutes probably, in fact. So you need to post more frequently on Twitter, but also understand when your audience are online and post within that window as well. If you're using some tools like Buffer, that will give you that information, but primarily I use a tool called Twiriad for that. I run a report probably once a quarter, which looks through my followers, identifies when they're online. For example, I know that on a Monday, most of my followers are online between 3 and 6 p.m, so I will probably schedule a few tweets between that time. But absolutely, don't do it for the sake of doing it. Focus on your audience and focus on what's relevant for them. Couple more. Is it advisable to create a content for 1 month or weekly? This all depends on how planned you are, how far ahead you plan, how in the moment you like to be. I think there's some key things coming up in terms of calendars. So for example, Black Friday, for Christmas, you may decide that you want to create all of your Christmas content in one go and schedule it. You may not be quite ready to do January, February and March. It really is up to you how far in advance you might like to go. You may decide to know your themes for the next 12 months or have a broad idea, but get into more detail as you go on each quarter or month by month. This really is about time management and what works for you. Okay, I'll just see if there's any more questions. Thank you for taking your lunchtime to stick with this webinar and watch it through. I hope there's been lots of tips for you in terms of visual content. No more questions there right now, so I will just say thanks again for listening. Here's my contact details. You will get the slide deck. You will get a copy of the webinar. If you've got any questions at all, please feel free to contact me, send me direct messages through social media, or drop me an email. Thank you for your time. I will be back next month with a webinar where, because it's December, I will be reviewing all the updates and happenings from the past 12 months. Thanks again and have a great day.